Welcome to another episode of the Student Life Edvisors podcast. My name is Trey.
I'm Elaine.
And we are bringing to you another great conversation on paying for college.
Financial aid.
Oh yes, exactly. So today our topic is specifically managing expectations of financial aid. So we're just going to jump into this. When it comes to maybe the first thing somebody should be aware of, what is that?
So I think the first time you go through financial aid or anytime you run into problems, there's a lot of confusion of what you should do, how you should handle it, and the expectations of conversations with the financial aid office or the type of financial aid you even get from different schools. It's not really known until you're kind of thrown into it because it's based on your own personal situation. So you can hear stories from other people. Some people it's smooth and it runs great, and other people it's not. And I mean, I always like to throw in there that especially when we're talking about the start of a term,
right?
A few weeks out, a few days out, just remember if you have questions, concerns, or anything, and you waited a little too long, you got to be patient a bit with the financial aid office, just because they're also trying to get everyone's financial aid together. And if you have a question, I'm sure a lot of other people have questions, and they're all different and all different levels of urgency. And usually personally, it's really easy to mark your question urgent.
Right.
But it's just one of those things where I think it's a great thing to just discuss. Like, I know I got a lot of financial aid, you got some financial aid as well. And just understanding what to expect when this process happens is always helpful.
I agree with you, and I think that you made a good point about focusing on the urgency, because yes, from your perspective, you think that your issue needs to be addressed as soon as possible, but especially around that first week of school, maybe even the week before, a lot of people will have questions. That financial aid line can be as long as you can imagine. I remember
wait times.
Oh my goodness. I mean, we probably had hundreds of people in line for financial aid from the morning until the end of the day. So they are going through a tough time during that first week because everybody's just scrambled.
Everyone just has questions. Like I know your freshman year, you talk about how your aid fell through.
Yeah.
And that usually requires a visit to financial aid of, what do I do? Help me. My bill is due. They're going to drop my classes. What help? And looking for all the assistance you can get. And that is a very urgent situation. But it's just one thing to keep in perspective, that if you're having that issue, chances are there's a few other people that are also having that issue. So they have to work through it, and hopefully they can, usually, I got to give it to financial aid offices. Usually if there's something that they can resolve or help you get through, they will help you get through it. It's just you got to wait your turn sometimes.
Seriously. And yeah, it does take patience. I know the issue that I had my freshman year, I took, about a couple weeks to get resolved, and it took a lot of research on their part, and then it just came down to a mismatch on my application for financial aid and my application for the college. So it took a long time for us to get to that point, and it did take patience, but they eventually found out what happened, and then we got everything resolved moving forward.
Yeah.
But it can be a challenge for sure.
But even before you even get there, like when you get a financial aid letter and you're applying to schools for the first time, you're in your senior year of high school or whenever you're applying, and you're starting to get those financial aid applications in, you know what always kind of strikes me? It kind of seems what you would think may not be what happens. And in the world of financial aid, it's kind of good to have that mentality of like understanding that what you think may not be how it works, because it can be a little tricky. But a lot of people think, you complete the FAFSA, you get your EFC. Maybe you had to do the CSS profile for your school. You kind of get that information kind of travels with all the schools that you're applying to that accept the applications. And then they get their financial aid award letter thinking they're all going to be the same. And guess what? Most of the time,
it's not.
It's not.
Gotcha.
You might see things like federal aid that is similar from school to school. You might see some need-based aid awarded at one school and not another school.
Wow.
Because, it's actually based more on cost of attendance and your EFC.
Okay.
It's not just 100% based on your EFC. And then other types of financial aid you're already kind of getting. And then also when it comes to state and institutional aid, it might be different at each school you're applying to. Your state aid, even though some states will award if you're not going to school as a resident to other schools, not all states will do that. So if you're applying to some in-state schools and some out-of-state schools, you may or may not see that state award there.
Wow. So what I'm picking up from you is that same student, same financial situation, same merit, same experience, same awards. They're bringing in even scholarships, maybe outside scholarships that someone may bring to a particular school. They can get different aid at different schools.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think that's always eye-opening. You're applying to 5, 10 schools.
Right.
I mean, I actually think the number of schools where students apply now is increasing, and it's been increasing.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of fear you're not going to get in anywhere. So you're applying probably to all different types of schools, private schools, public schools, maybe some high-cost schools, maybe some smaller schools that have less of a cost. And all because of that, the EFC, the cost of attendance, the way the school is required to award you, there are some rules on that. They just can't say, oh, you know what, we really want this person to go here. I'm going to give them, when it comes to federal money, that is, federal money and some state money, they can't just give anyone what they want. There's very strict rules that they have to follow.
Right.
When it comes to the institutional aid, which is one of the biggest variants when you're looking at financial aid awards, that's all up to the school.
Interesting.
I mean, we were looking up some college scholarships the other day, and
oh yeah, we were. You can, for example, say you're a high achieving student, I don't know, in Pennsylvania, maybe you were top 10% of your class, and then you want to go to a school, let's say in Colorado. Maybe that school will have a scholarship for high performing students, but then another school that you wanted to go to, let's say Oklahoma, they may be offering even more for the same qualifications.
Yeah. Everyone is different. Everyone's qualifications can be different. Some schools might require 3.5, and that could go up from there, especially when talking merit.
Oh, yeah.
And then also keep in mind extracurriculars. If for some reason you're going to get any money for, maybe playing an instrument, some art, something, but they are going to require you to do that particular program in some way. You might get money for a school that offers that, but there could be another school is like, that's a great thing on basically your college application, but we don't really offer any funds for that. We don't really have any programs or clubs or teams or anything that you'd be able to demonstrate that in, but we think that's a great reason why you're at our school. So it all differs, and every school is different, and it's up to them ultimately on institutional.
Yeah, this is interesting. So we talked about the institutional aspect of it, but just to be clear for someone who may be listening, is it possible for someone to receive a Pell Grant at one school, even though their financial situation is the same, but then they go to a different school and them no longer be eligible for that Pell Grant or maybe as much of it?
Yes. So that one's always tricky because the Pell Grant is based on a lot of different things. So you have to fill out the FAFSA to get it. You have to have an expected family contribution to get it. That EFC number that we've been throwing around quite a bit. And then the school is going to look at their cost of attendance and kind of compare that to your EFC.
Right.
They're going to look at your enrollment, if you're being enrolled full-time, 3/4 time, half-time, or less than half-time. And, essentially, they're really restricted on what they can give with something like a federal Pell Grant. So if there's one school who let's say you have a modest EFC.
Okay.
And you have a cost of attendance at one school that is very high and one that is very low. And let's just range it somewhere between 50,000 and maybe like 10,000. Depending on the actual situation, like you might qualify for a full Pell Grant at the $50,000 school cost of attendance, but you might qualify for some Pell, maybe no Pell, at the school with a lower cost of attendance. It's all kind of how it lays out once the financial aid office is looking at you specifically to determine that award.
Yeah, that's interesting. So someone's EFC is not going to change from school to school, but what they're eligible for can vary based on the cost of attendance.
And that one always gets tricky too with
Yeah.
things like subsidized loans, direct subsidized loans, that need-based federal student loan.
Right.
You could be determined to have financial need at one school and determined not to have financial need at another school. Because once again, they're looking at the cost of attendance versus your expected family contribution. The higher the cost of attendance, the easier it's to qualify for a financial need.
Right.
Pell Grants a little different because they have very strict EFC type of cutoffs. But things like a direct Stafford loan, the subsidized need-based loan, that one is more like cost of attendance minus EFC. If there's any difference, that's considered a financial need. So if your EFC is $12,000 and you're going to a school that's $50,000 cost of attendance, there's a financial need there.
Right.
But say you're going back to that school with an $8,000 cost of attendance.
Yeah.
Now you actually don't have a financial need.
Exactly.
And everyone wants that subsidized loan. I get it.
Right. Some benefits there.
There's some really nice benefits. It's a loan you can't really beat as a student. So they really want that subsidized loan. But if you are not eligible at a school, you can't just ask for it. And you can't say, well, that other school gave it to me, because it's a different situation.
Right. Different cost of attendance.
Different calculations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting, but I think it's good for our listeners to know that their financial situation likely will vary from school to school. So maybe if they're taking a look at the transparency list and they're seeing the increase in cost for a given university or maybe a few schools that they're interested in, they can see like, hey, this school could end up costing this much more by the time I'm in my third or fourth year. So what does my aid look like now? And then what could that look like in a couple of years if prices were to increase?
Yeah, even if you're in school, it's always important to keep an eye on your financial aid and the cost of college. Because we know I know the transparency lists are one of your favorites.
Oh yeah. It's some fascinating stuff, I must say.
On collegecost.ed.gov. Yes. So it's from a trusted source where they kind of show increases of cost of attendance over time. And then the other tricky part with that too is, you get your freshman year award. You get some institutional scholarships and grants in there.
Get excited.
And you think that's going to carry over. And some of them are really specific to incoming freshmen or first year at that school. And if you're not aware of what you're accepting and it disappears, that can leave a huge financial gap for you, which then the future years, it's like, if you can barely get by year one, you need to really make sure you understand your financial aid award.
Thank you for getting to this point in the podcast. As you know, we give you a bonus code with every single episode. Use the bonus code EFCCOA for 100 points, available exclusively on scholarshippoints.com. Remember that you can use those points to enter into scholarships, and we give away scholarships every single month. So who knows, you could be the next winner. Remember, the code is EFCCOA. Now let's get back to the podcast. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned from talking to you a lot is that you do have to ask questions. You've got to really be proactive when it comes to this process. So one of the things that you did that I didn't do was this idea of negotiating financial aid. How was that experience for you?
My experience negotiating financial aid, wow, I wish I had learned or had a podcast I could listen to that could help me understand what that meant. Someone told me, and this was just word of mouth, that they needed more financial aid and they went to the financial aid office and asked.
Straight up?
Just asked. And I actually tell people to do that now. But I add a little more context because if you're going to ask for more financial aid, you need to tell them why.
Yeah.
Everyone would love more money.
Yeah, you're not really separating yourself by saying, hey, I want more money to go to this school. It's like, so are all of the other students.
Yeah, you really have to have why? Why do you need more money? This is as much as we awarded you. And you can even ask them additional questions, about some tips that we'll share. But things like just telling them my parents lost their job, or there was a reduced, I'm not able to work part-time right now. My school class load is too much. and even earning extra spending money is just not going to really happen, and I need some more financial aid to maybe cover some of my living expenses, anything I need. Go in there with an explanation of why you need help. They might even tell you that you qualify for what's known as the financial aid appeal, which is really a more formal process that if there's a major change to financial situation or something going on, they can have you fill out an appeal, and that EFC, that expected family contribution, could change.
Wow.
And if that changes, you could be eligible for additional aid. But if you're just negotiating, they could say, okay, well, let's see what we have available. Let's look at some of our different options.
Okay.
But one of the best tricks to kind of ask when you're going in there, give the semester or the term a few weeks, and then go in and see if there's any additional aid that could be awarded. Maybe scholarships that were awarded to students who didn't actually end up enrolling.
Yeah.
Some money that freed up.
Yeah.
If you read the terms and conditions and you technically qualify, you just weren't you were given a certain amount. You can ask if you can get a little bit more, a little more help, but you have to do some research and explain why you need more help.
I like that. And I think that's what Ryan did when we had Ryan Kelly and we interviewed her. Check out that podcast if you haven't listened to that one. But she was so proactive about finding different ways to get scholarships. And like you said, with the money that goes unawarded, the schools are looking to maximize their student population every single term. So they're trying to get as many students, as many of the high performing students as they can. They want the best of the best, just like every other school wants the best of the best. So they offer those scholarships, in those financial aid packages. However, like you said, every student can't go to one school. So maybe they offered some and hey, it didn't end up getting used. So that opens up the door for some other students.
It does. And the worst answer you can get is no.
That's true.
So yeah, it does take some time to pull all that together, get that information together, but why not try?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So I think, this conversation has been good and pretty insightful. I think the biggest thing that we've kind of discussed is when it comes to managing expectations about financial aid, the one thing we have to do is be proactive. Do the research. When you look at how cost of attendance can impact your aid, depending on the school you go to, the only way you're going to really know what you're getting into is by doing that research and not being so kind of just, oh yeah, I'll go with the wind and I'm looking at this school and only focusing on that. You really do have to compare and contrast, pull out a Venn diagram if you got to and break it down.
You really do. And you really have to look at every financial aid package you get. And honestly, I never say, a lot of people are like, well, that school's too expensive, I'm not going to bother. There's no reason to not try. If there's a school you really want to go to, just know your budget ahead of time. So don't get too tied to the school name. Look at the financial aid package that you get, because you could have a school that has a really average cost of attendance and one that has one really high. And ultimately, you could pay less for the one that's really high if they give you a lot of financial aid.
Exactly. You don't know what that is going to be until you apply.
And, I've seen parents kind of break it down to do the net price.
Net price.
Yeah, which is essentially so cost of attendance is more than tuition, fees, direct things you pay to the school. It includes some other things.
Yeah.
But some families will go through and look at the cost of attendance or the student's budget, and then they'll subtract just scholarships and grants, all that free aid, and look at how much they have to come up with out of pocket, either with cash, savings plans, or loans. And then they look at that. But the net price is before anything you'd really have to pay back or earn. So they compare it that way, and they've had situations where schools have almost double the cost of attendance, and based on what the school offered the student, that school could be cheaper than the one with the lower cost of attendance in the end, once they get their financial aid. But those terms and conditions, you need a GPA, you need to do certain things.
Yeah. Make
sure you do it.
You do. You don't want to be in the situation where you were able to pay less for college because you had a scholarship, and then that scholarship for some reason just bam went away. So because you Yeah.
You didn't do it.
Yeah, you didn't do it.
You didn't do
it. You don't want that. We've talked about a bunch of things today, but just to keep it simple for folks to remember, you want to be proactive. You want to be your own advocate when it comes to financial aid to help you manage those expectations. You got to be patient. Things might not happen as soon as you want them to. You want to be first in line. There might be a line. So you got to do what you got to do. But I do think that breaking down those award letters from the different universities, the colleges that you're interested in, you got to do the math, do the research, take the time, because like you said, what's on the paper might not actually be what it feels like when you factor in all of the cost and all of what you're putting into it. So I think folks got to research, be your own advocate. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode. Once again, my name is Trey.
I'm Elaine.
And we will catch you next time.